Everything you know feels real. The rules you follow, the limits you accept, the life you're living right now feels solid, permanent, unchangeable. But here's the truth, most people never stop long enough to question. What feels real isn't always what is real. From the time you were young, someone handed you a script. How success looks, what's possible for you, was too much to want. And slowly, without even noticing, you memorized the lines. You didn't choose most of your beliefs. You inherited them. And today, I want to talk about breaking out of that illusion. Because the moment you realize the world isn't fixed, you realize you're not either most. People walk around convinced they see the world exactly as it is. They think their opinions are facts, their limits are natural, and their circumstances are permanent. But the truth is, none of us arrived here seeing clearly. What we call reality was handed to us piece by piece, long before we ever had the language or power to question it. Psychology backs this up. Research shows that more than 90% of our thoughts repeat every single day, and the majority of those thoughts were formed early in life. Not by choice, but by exposure. Family conversations at the dinner table, the tone of teachers in classrooms, the neighborhoods we grew up in, the things we watched people struggle for, and the things we never saw anyone achieve. When you're young, you don't analyze information, you absorb it. If you heard growing up that people from your background don't make it far, that message didn't feel like an opinion. It felt like a law. If you were constantly told to play it safe, not dream too big, not step out of line, that didn't feel like fear. It felt like wisdom being passed down. And if all you ever saw around you was struggle, bills overdue, stress normalized, and survival celebrated more than progress, then struggle became your baseline, not because it's all life offers, but because it's all you were shown. That's not reality. That's conditioning. Two people can live in the same city, breathe the same air, hear the same news, and walk on the same streets, yet have completely different beliefs about what's possible. One grows up watching people build businesses, talk about ownership, take risks, fail forward, and try again. The other grows up watching people clock in, clock out, wait for Friday, and fear Monday. Same environment on the surface, but a completely different internal map. One sees opportunity everywhere, the other sees danger everywhere. Reality didn't change, perspective did. This is why so many people feel stuck without understanding why. They're fighting the world, but the real battle is happening inside their own mind. You can't outperform the beliefs you carry. You can't rise higher than the ceiling you've accepted. If deep down you believe success is for someone else, your actions will always quietly sabotage your potential. Not because you're lazy or incapable, but because your mind is trying to stay loyal to what feels familiar. Familiar feels safe, even when it hurts. That's why people defend limitations like they're protecting the truth. They'll argue against opportunity. They'll downplay ambition. They'll criticize growth, not because it's wrong, but because it threatens the story they've been living in. When someone around them breaks out, it exposes the lie. It forces the question they've been avoiding. Was it never impossible? Or did I just believe it was? Think about how early these ideas get locked in. A kid fails a test once and hears, "You're not smart like that." A young person tries something new and hears laughter instead of encouragement. A dream gets called unrealistic before it even has a chance to breathe. Those moments don't disappear, they stack. Over time, they turn into identity. I'm not good with money. I'm not a leader. I'm not creative. I'm not built for more. And once an idea becomes identity, people will protect it harder than facts. But here's the part they never told you. The brain doesn't know the difference between repetition and truth. What you repeat becomes real to you, whether it's accurate or not. Neuroscience shows that neural pathways strengthen through repetition. The more you think a thought, the more automatic it becomes. So if you were raised around limitation, your brain simply practiced limitation. It didn't decide it was right. It just practiced it enough to make it feel natural. That means something powerful. If your reality was practiced into you, it can be practiced out of you. Look at people who completely transform their lives. Not overnight miracles, but real, grounded transformations. People who grew up broke and learned financial literacy in their 30s. People who were told they weren't smart and later became experts in their field. People who watched dysfunction their whole life and chose to build something healthier. None of them discovered a new world. They discovered a new lens. They questioned what they were told, and questioning is uncomfortable. It feels like betrayal at first. Betrayal of family beliefs, betrayal of cultural expectations, betrayal of the version of you that learned how to survive. But growth isn't about disrespecting where you came from. It's about refusing to be trapped by it. You can honor the past without living in it. Once you understand that your beliefs will learn, you stop taking them personally. You stop shaming yourself for thinking small. You stop judging yourself for fear. You realize it wasn't a flaw, it was programming. And when something is programmed, it can be rewritten, but rewriting requires intention. You don't accidentally outgrow conditioning. You challenge it. You study it. You replace it. You start paying attention to the thoughts that automatically show up. When your mind says that's not for me, you ask why. When it says I can't, you look for evidence. When it tells you to stay small, you ask who taught you that. Awareness is the first crack in the wall. Once you see the wall, you stop confusing it with the sky. This process doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you accountable. Because now you know that if you keep living the same way, it's not because you had no choice. It's because you chose familiarity over growth. And that's a heavy realization, but it's also freeing. Because choice means power. You don't need permission to update your beliefs. You don't need approval to want more. You don't need validation to rewrite your story. The same mind that learned limitation can learn expansion. The same environment that taught survival can become the fuel for strategy. Pain doesn't have to be a prison, it can be information. Every level you want to reach requires you to let go of a belief that once kept you safe. Safety and growth rarely coexist. Growth demands new thinking, new circles, new standards. It demands that you stop confusing comfort with truth. What feels real is often just what you've rehearsed the longest. The moment you understand that, everything shifts. You stop seeing the world as fixed and start seeing it as responsive. You stop waiting for conditions to change and start changing your conditions internally. You realize that reality isn't something you're stuck inside of, it's something you participate in shaping. And once that clicks, you can never unsee it. Comfort is one of the most convincing illusions you will ever face in life. It feels solid, it feels safe, it feels like proof that you are doing everything right. Waking up every morning to the same routine, clocking in at the same job, driving the same route, talking to the same people. It all feels secure. Security feels responsible. Staying where you are feels logical, and for a moment, you might even believe it is freedom. But that is where the trick lives. Comfort is often just fear wearing clean clothes. Fear that whispers to you that change is dangerous, that risk is foolish, that the unknown will eat you alive. And so instead of moving forward, you settle, you wait, you convince yourself that the safe choice is the smart choice. But the truth is, it's the easiest lie to believe. Look at the lives all around you. How many people stay in jobs they hate for decades? Not because they love them, but because they fear uncertainty more than they hate their own unhappiness. They've been trained to value stability over joy, security over growth, familiarity over potential. In 2023, research showed that over 60% of workers felt disengaged or miserable at work. Yet most of them stayed because it pays the bills. Think about that for a second. A majority of people wake up every day and give their time, energy, and creativity to something that drains them. And they call it responsibility. They call it adulthood. But the reality is that they are living in a cage, padded just enough to make it feel safe. Comfort convinces you that moving is dangerous. It convinces you that questioning, stretching, stepping into uncertainty is foolish. But the reality is, staying still is what slowly costs you your life. Your dreams, your time, your vitality. Growth doesn't show up as a big announcement with fireworks and fanfare. It creeps in through awkward, uncomfortable, lonely moments where no one else is cheering you on. Growth shows up as the first time you try something new and fail. It shows up as the nights when you sit alone with your thoughts and wonder if you cut out for more. And it always feels real until you realize that it's only uncomfortable because it matters. Everything meaningful you've ever achieved came from discomfort. Remember learning to walk as a child. Every scraped knee, every fall, every bruise taught you more about balance than anyone could ever tell you. Remember learning to speak. The first words were awkward, stumbling, often misunderstood, but they broke the barrier between you and the world. Remember surviving moments that felt impossible, when you had to make decisions with incomplete information, with no safety net. Those were all moments where comfort could have kept you safe, but you chose, or your instinct chose, to grow. You didn't know it then, but every meaningful step in your life came from refusing to stay still. from leaning into discomfort. The illusion isn't that change is dangerous. The illusion is believing comfort will save you. It is believing that if you just stay where you are long enough, the world will bend in your favor, that the walls around you will protect you, that stagnation is security. But stagnation is a slow suffocation. It lulls you with small pleasures and distractions while your potential fades in the background. The longer you stay, the more comfortable the cage feels, and the harder it becomes to even recognize that it's a cage. Comfort can be seductive. It whispers to you that growth is optional, that you're already doing enough, that you don't need to stretch, don't need to risk, don't need to step into the unknown. It is a silent thief. You see people around you celebrating small victories, living small lives, and calling them success. And you might even feel a sense of relief that you're part of that world because it's safe. But deep down, you know it's not enough. You feel it in the quiet moments, in the empty spaces, in the time you scroll through your phone pretending that someone else's life can fill the gaps in your own. To escape this illusion, you must begin to recognize the difference between comfort and real security. Real security is built through preparation, through skill, through discipline, through repeated action and accountability. Comfort is a passive trap. It waits for you to give in, to stop asking questions, to stop seeking more. And the moment you decide to leave comfort behind, you will feel the discomfort hit you immediately. You'll feel the fear, the doubt, the awkwardness, the loneliness. That is proof that you're alive, that you're moving, that you're creating something worth chasing. Think about the people you admire, the ones who moved mountains in their lives, built businesses, created legacies, made an impact. Every single one of them had to leave comfort behind. Every one of them had to sit in fear and do it anyway. Every one of them had to confront moments where it would have been easier to turn back, to settle, to believe the lie that comfort is safety. And every one of them knows that if they had stayed comfortable, if they had chosen ease over risk, they would still be invisible to the life they were meant to live. Your mind will try to convince you to stay where you are. It will remind you of the bills, the responsibilities, the what ifs. It will play the same tape over and over until it becomes familiar. And that is why it's so dangerous. Familiarity feels safe, even when it's killing you softly. Familiarity lulls you into inaction, disguises fear as wisdom, and convinces you that survival is the same as thriving. But thriving doesn't come from ease. Thriving comes from testing limits, stepping into discomfort, and embracing the unknown long enough to discover your own strength. So the next time you feel that whisper, that gentle nudge that says you should stay, you should wait, you should not risk, recognize it for what it is. It's fear dressed in clean clothes. It's the illusion of comfort speaking. Don't let it fool you. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every life-changing move, every story worth telling begins in the space where comfort ends. The people who have left their mark on the world, the people whose lives are studied, celebrated, and remembered, they all started by refusing to accept the illusion that staying still was safe. Comfort is not your friend. It is the quiet enemy that hides in plain sight. The second you see it for what it is, you reclaim control. The second you decide to move, even when it feels unsafe, you step into your own power. Every step outside of comfort, every decision to risk, every choice to grow, even when it's lonely, even when it's scary, even when it doesn't feel logical. That's where life begins. That's where your reality starts to expand. That's where your potential wakes up. Comfort will always try to call you back, but the moment you step into discomfort intentionally, the moment you accept that growth is messy, awkward, and often lonely, that's when you break free from the strongest illusion you've ever known. And once you step through that door, once you choose the challenge over ease, the fear over false security, you start to see the world and yourself exactly as it is, full of opportunity, full of possibility, and waiting for you to take it. Most people never stop to see it. But the world doesn't move the way they think it does. Systems don't exist to serve you. They exist to keep you busy, compliant, and distracted. The truth is harsh. Systems don't benefit thinkers. They don't reward people who ask questions or who challenge the status quo. They benefit followers, people who show up every day, punch in, scroll, buy, consume, obey, and never challenge the invisible strings pulling them along. And most of us live like we're free when, in reality, the rules were written for us to stay where we are. Look at money, look at the economy, look at the world around you. If everyone understood interest, inflation, debt, and investment, the structures that hold power in place would collapse overnight. If everyone questioned why they are taught to borrow more than they save, why the middle class works harder to remain average, why the wealthy always seem wealthier, the illusion would die. If everyone truly believed in themselves, manipulation would fail. Scams, marketing tricks, fear-based tactics, they only work because people stop asking questions. People stop thinking. People accept. And when people accept, the system thrives. So what does the system do? It sells distractions. It sells endless scrolling. It sells fake aspirations. It sells lives you're supposed to chase but can never truly own. You're told what success looks like. You're told which lifestyle is desirable. You're told to care about things that make you feel wealthy on the surface, but leave your soul bankrupt underneath. And most of the time you chase it without realizing you're running in a circle. You're taught to measure yourself by your possessions, your image, your influence on social media. But those are illusions. They're smoke and mirrors designed to keep you spinning, keep you blind, keep you from seeing the real leverage in life. Think about how we value things today. Most people can tell you the price of sneakers, phones, cars, the latest gadgets. They know the trends. They know what's hot. But most people can't tell you the difference between an asset and a liability, how interest works, what equity really means, or how to make their money work for them instead of the other way around. And that's no accident. That's taught. That's reinforced. That's why you never question what you're handed. That's why the illusion stays intact. And when you do start questioning, everything changes. You notice the cracks. You start seeing how much of life is smoke and mirrors. You start understanding that the rules weren't made to lift you. You start realizing that the chains you thought were invisible were just cleverly disguised. And once you see those cracks, you can't unsee them. Awareness is dangerous to the illusion. It's dangerous to the people and systems that benefit from your compliance, but it is powerful for you because once you see it, you have the chance to do something different. You have the chance to create real leverage in your life. You have the chance to stop spinning in circles. The moment you question, the game changes. You start seeing patterns where before you saw randomness. You start seeing opportunities where before you saw obstacles. You begin to understand that you're not powerless. You've been performing a script you didn't write, following rules you didn't agree to, playing a game that was never built for you to win. And realizing that, that's where transformation starts. It's why so many people never break free. They're comfortable with the illusion because it's familiar. It's safe to be a follower. It's safe to believe that the system is working in your favor, even when deep down you feel the tension, the frustration, the small gnawing sense that something isn't right. That tension is your intuition, your inner voice telling you that the world you're living in is not fully yours. But most people ignore it, rationalize it, drown it out with distractions. They buy a new phone, a new car, a new status symbol, and tell themselves that now, finally, they're winning. And the system smiles. When you decide to question, that's when fear sets in. The fear of leaving behind comfort, of looking like the outlier, of seeing the truth and realizing the choices you've made didn't have to be the ones you made. But fear is not the opposite of power. It's the gateway. If you lean into it, you start to see the mechanics of the world. You start to see how influence works, how money flows, how attention is captured and sold. You start to see what is real and what is an illusion. And from that perspective, you can build differently. You can strategize differently. You can make decisions that work for you instead of for the system. Society profits when you don't question. It profits when you accept, when you obey, when you consume without clarity, but it loses when you start asking why, how, and what if. That's why your education, your culture, your environment all work to train obedience. That's why conformity is celebrated, while curiosity is treated with suspicion. But curiosity is your power. Asking questions is the first step to control. But the first step to independence, the first step to designing a life that works for you. Once you take the first step and start questioning, everything else begins to follow. You begin to see who really deserves your trust, who is guiding you toward growth, and who is keeping you in the loop of illusion. You start to see how much energy you've been spending on things that don't serve your purpose. And the most beautiful part is this: you're not powerless in this world. You always have the ability to shift your perspective, to see the patterns, to make different choices. You have the ability to leverage awareness into action and action into results. The cracks you see are not failures, they're opportunities. The broken pieces of the illusion are what allow you to build something real. You can't build a foundation on a lie. And now that the lie has been exposed, you have the chance to lay your own bricks, to choose your own path, to think for yourself in a world designed to make you forget how. And once you do that, nothing can stop you from creating a reality that is fully yours. The danger is that the system doesn't want you to see these cracks. It wants you compliant, distracted, and predictable. But your advantage is awareness. Your advantage is the willingness to think differently, to move intentionally, to refuse to live by a script you didn't write. Once you start seeing through the smoke and mirrors, you start reclaiming your time, your energy, your money, your influence, your life. You stop being a consumer of illusions and become a creator of realities. It's not easy. It's not popular. It's lonely at first. But growth and freedom have never been comfortable. The moment you question, you wake up. The moment you stop obeying blindly, you gain clarity. The moment you choose to think for yourself, you reclaim your power. And that power is limitless because it comes from inside and no one can take it from you. The moment you start asking why instead of just what, the game shifts. You see the patterns, you see the manipulations, you see how easily the illusion holds people down, and you understand finally that you are not here to be held down. You are here to rise, to create, to move, to expand. Awareness is dangerous to the illusion, but it is freedom to you. And once you taste that freedom, you can never go back to living unconsciously. Most people don't change because they're loyal to a version of themselves that no longer serves them. They hold on to old labels, old stories, old excuses like they're sacred. I'm not that type of person, they say. I've always been like this. This is just who I am. And for a while, those words feel true. They become identity. They become comfort. They become chains disguised as truth. But what most people don't realize is that identity is not fixed. It's a practice. It's a habit. It's something that can be updated. The brain is neuroplastic. It is capable of rewiring itself based on what you focus on, based on what you practice, based on the choices you make consistently over time. That means the limits you feel, the fears you carry, the boundaries you've accepted, they're not permanent. They're rehearsed. And rehearsed habits can be replaced with new ones. Every habit you have, every thought pattern, every repeated behavior is part of a practiced identity. If you spent years thinking you can't handle money, or that leadership isn't for you, or that confidence is something other people are born with, that has become your identity. Not because it's true, but because you've repeated it long enough for your brain to accept it as fact. And the scary part is that when you believe in a fixed identity, your actions begin to confirm it. You don't take risks because you aren't the type. You don't speak up because that's not who you are. You don't pursue opportunities because you've always been too cautious. And so the life you live becomes a reflection of an old, outdated self, while the person you could be remains unseen. Look at the people who completely changed their lives. Former addicts who became leaders in their communities. People who grew up with nothing and became investors, entrepreneurs, and mentors. Quiet kids who found their voice and became powerful speakers. They didn't discover a new world outside themselves. They discovered a new self within themselves. They rewired their brains, replaced old habits, and stepped into a version of who they were capable of being. And as their identity changed, their reality changed with it. Opportunities appeared where none had existed. Relationships shifted. Perspective shifted. Everything aligned with the new version of who they allowed themselves to be. Identity is not something given to you, it's something you create. The illusion tells you this is who you are, you can't be different. That's fear speaking. That's your comfort zone hiding behind labels. That's the part of you that is terrified to risk. But the truth is, this is who you've been. That's all it is. And if who you've been isn't serving you, you have the power to update it. It's not about pretending. It's not about being someone you're not. It's about choosing the person you want to become and practicing their behaviors, thoughts, and habits until they become real. Every day you get a choice. Every day you can decide which version of yourself you want to show up as. You can choose the identity of someone who complains, who gives up, who blames circumstance, who waits for permission. Or you can choose the identity of someone who studies, who works, who invests in themselves, who faces fear, who builds legacy. And the beautiful thing is, when you show up consistently as this new version of yourself, your brain rewires to accept it as truth. What once felt impossible now feels natural. What once seemed intimidating now feels doable. What once seemed like someone else's life now feels like yours. Most people resist this because change is uncomfortable. They cling to old labels because even if they limit them, they're familiar. Even if they keep them small, they're predictable. Even if they keep them safe, they're known. But growth never comes from familiarity. Growth comes from the willingness to challenge who you've been and step into who you can become. Every time you choose a new thought, every time you take a new action, every time you refuse the old scripts you've memorized, you're creating a new identity. You're breaking the chain of repetition. You're telling the world, and more importantly yourself, that you are not bound by the past. Think about the small changes that compound over time. Waking up earlier, reading, exercising, learning a new skill, speaking positively to yourself, treating people with integrity even when no one is watching. These are not glamorous changes. They don't feel monumental at first, but they are rewiring your identity at the core. They are proving to your brain in small but consistent ways that you are not the person you once were. They are teaching your subconscious new patterns, new habits, new truths. And as your identity updates, the world responds. You attract different opportunities, different relationships, different circumstances.